really, aggressive push. And some people need that. Some people, if you did that, they'd run away. But you're right. You just have to judge that situation. You're right.
And the general response is always the best way to approach a situation. That's after you've tried repeatedly. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like the last line is to withdraw fellowship from somebody who's in sin, has been told repeatedly, begged.
Yeah.
And finally they get to the point they're refusing, and you have to do that. I kind of view this as the same thing. This is the last resort. We've gone through all these other things, and now
Yeah.
I've got to poke the bear and make you
Yeah.
look yourself in the mirror and see how you're going to respond.
That's right. I've heard that saying before, I'd rather offend you on this side of heaven than offend you on the other side of not telling you the truth or whatever. And there's a great wisdom in that. And of course, judging that situation properly and doing it right. You're right. Good deal. Well, there are some evil effects of that, and evil effects of anger, and there's a couple of different occurrences of that. But I would just like to ask this question: is anger ever justified? Is it okay to be angry sometimes?
Yes.
Yes, it is. It certainly is. Mark chapter 3, 1 through 5, that's exactly what Russ was talking about. And sometimes people forget about this side of Jesus. That's Mark chapter 3, 1 through 5. Somebody read that, please.
He entered again into a synagogue, and a man was there whose hand was... Am I right?
You're right. Withered hand.
Withered. They were watching him to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath, so they might accuse him. He said to the man with the withered hand, "Get up and come forward." And he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill?" But they kept silent. After looking around at them with anger, grieved their hardness of heart.
All right, you keep going, if you don't mind. Finish that verse 5.
He said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored.
I was wrong. I was thinking of the different passage where Jesus got mad, and we always think of that one. And that's kind of the go-to. But this is another one. I forgot about it when I was looking at the number. But you remember that Jesus did that. That they did this, of course, to test him. Do you think Jesus got tired of that? I know that he did. He got tired of them. It says literally in verse 2, so that they might accuse him. You ever been under that microscope before? People just start putting you at fault and trying to test you. Well, Jesus has been under that, certainly, and maybe even a much more severe sense than we were. But they tried constantly to accuse him, to catch him doing wrong. And that had to have pressure with it. The Lord didn't like that. And of course, they asked that question: is it law for you to do this on the Sabbath? They're missing the whole concept that this is the Son of God doing miraculous things, and they're more worried about if he should be doing this on the Sabbath. Of course he should. It's a good thing. But that's another story for another day. But it says he looked around at them with anger in verse 5. I've looked at people with anger before. Not always for the best reason, but sometimes I have looked at people with anger because they were doing something very wrong that not only affected them, but affected other people, maybe their children. Maybe you've been in a situation like that. I know my brother told me a story where he went into a house when he was working for the police department. I forgot what call it was that got him there, but he busted down the door. It was very urgent. And needless to say, the parents were strung out on drugs and were literally passed out on the couch, and the children were playing in the floor, and they were basically laying in their own feces. And my brother said it took everything in my mind to not beat that man to a pulp, because he said it just bothered me that here they are, and I was so angry at just their neglect of their children. He said that just blows your mind. He said until you are put in that situation, he said you don't even understand how mad it makes you if you have any love for children or human beings in general. It can make you very angry very quickly. And police officers have to guard themselves because they see that junk every day and shouldn't have to, but they do. So is anger ever justified? Yes, it is. And we need to watch ourselves, because it's me especially talking to Tate first and coming forward. I have to watch myself. Anger shouldn't be something that I do every day. Definitely not. I try to get angry as least amount of time as possible, because being angry is not the best feeling in the world. You ever been so mad before you get done with it and maybe you calm down and you feel sick? You feel sick to yourself, really? I mean, You feel like you've been on this high, and you're just like, hey, I'm mad at the world. Maybe you've had to holler and outside at the sky, and you've had to just get it out of you. But when you're done, you just have that crash. Maybe, I don't know. I know of some people that's told me that, and of course I've had my fair share of being angry. But what are some things we need to be mad at? Let me ask that question. We're going to get there in a moment too, of a couple other verses. But what should provoke us to anger? Evil. That's a good one, right? Is there anything evil going on in the world that people are calling good today? Yeah. Yeah, anything in the world, right? It makes me think of Jeremiah that talks about, woe unto them that call good evil and evil good. Yeah, woe unto them, because that's not good. You may call it good, but it still doesn't make it good. And we understand that. God has given people the free choice to live how they want to. That's their decision. But I still cannot condone of that. It should bother me in that. Let's read this verse. Isaiah 5, verse 20. Isaiah 5, verse 20. Isaiah 5, verse 20. Let's see what it says. Yes, that's the verse. Excuse me. I'll read it. It says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. We have people that are doing that, but you have that caution in the Bible that woe unto those, that we should not do that. You see that word woe, literally, we should back away from that, as we would say as a horse, to stop. And we should stop doing that, because people do that every day. They call things good that are evil, and that should provoke us. It should cause us to not be okay. Let me put it that way. And we're handling that in a good place, of course. Here's some things that provoke anger in people that should not have. And we study this, so we're not going to take the time to examine it deeply. But Jonah 3:10 verses 4 through chapter 4, verse 1. Remember why Jonah was mad? Who repented? That's right, that God didn't destroy Nineveh because Nineveh repented. He was mad. He was tore up. And we talked about in that lesson how if that's us, that's ridiculous. That we may not like people, but we want everybody to go to heaven. Whether they're from Afghanistan, Covington, Georgia, it doesn't matter how bad they've been to us. No one deserves the punishment of hell. We should never want them to go there. And you know what I'm talking about. It should never be our desire to do that. But Jonah was mad. That's not a correct way of being mad. The same thing in Luke chapter 15, verse 28. We'll read this one, 25 through 28. Somebody read that, please. Luke 15, 25 through 28. Luke 15, 25 through 28.
Now his older son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. And he summoned one of the servants and began inquiring what these things could be. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he became angry and was not willing to go in, and his father came out and began pleading with him.
He was mad that his brother came home. Or no, well, the fact was, he was mad that his brother was rewarded for coming home. And you remember what he said in verse 29, these many years have I been serving you, and I've never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you have gave me a young coat that I might make merry with my friends. You never gave me that. So you think about that. I've had certain instances where I know of people that have just really, if a person comes to Jesus, should we be excited? We should. And just because they didn't come to Him in the early stages of life does not mean that should make us upset. We should rejoice over that. Now, of course, the angels are rejoicing, God's rejoicing, He's happy about that. But thinking about that people have been in very bad situations, and if they escape the punishment of sin through Jesus, that should make us excited. Yes, sir.
One of the most sobering thoughts is when you think about people, you've known some people who we would continue to go without being Christians, a whole other story. People that we would deem as really good-hearted people
Mm-hmm.
who never got right with God.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think about the fact studied with Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't think, with the possible exception of Noah, maybe I don't think anybody in the room needs an explanation on who he is or what he did.
Yeah.
And he repented, he confessed, he was baptized, and he was added
Mm-hmm.
to the church. Now, I would be very surprised if some people that were in the congregation where this guy who studied with them went were like, why would you study with him?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But shouldn't you be angry at somebody that would judge you for sharing that word with somebody like that? I mean,
That's righteous indignation.
And you see everybody's,
Yeah.
it's just the logical,
Yeah.
you got this person, they've done so much evil, and now they're going to heaven, and my buddy who gave you the shirt off his back and just was hesitant to never do it is in hell.
Yeah.
You got a mindset difference, and it's hard sometimes to accept that.
Yeah.
And I know what I would say to somebody like that. I would go and say, well, Jesus said while he was on the cross, the people who tortured and murdered him, Father, forgive them.
Yep.
They don't know what they're doing. Well, some of them knew pretty well what they were doing, but it's like the implications of
Yeah.
what they were doing may not have settled.
I mean, how many times have you heard that before? People say, "Oh, they're getting what they deserve. Go ahead and kill them, take them out." I've heard that about people say that about Afghanistan or whatever. Obviously, people need to be punished, obviously for what they did. But you're right. You're right, and that should bother us if people have that attitude of these are incorrect ways of being angry. And you're right. That we should never be angry if a man turns away from his sin and finds God. Literally. I've had people ask me that before, and they said, you can't be forgiven for murder, can you? And I'm like, well, people that killed Jesus were forgiven. Paul was forgiven. He was a murderer. You can be forgiven. Yes, it's a serious sin, but sin is sin.
The thing that stands out in my mind most from, I'm not on Facebook anymore, but from when I was,
Mm-hmm.
and this will be ingrained in my head forever, it was a statement, when Paul entered heaven,
Mm-hmm.
he was welcomed with rejoicing at the hands of those he martyred.
Yeah.
That's how Christianity works.
That's right. That's right. You're right. We looked at some ways to not do it correctly, reasons not to be angry, but let's look at some reasons to be angry. First thing that came to my mind when studying this subject was Proverbs 6:16 through 19. You probably know what that says, but we will look at it. Let's see. Proverbs 6:16 through 19. It says, "These 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift to running to evil, false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren." Those things we should absolutely despise, shouldn't we? Because the Lord does. And if he hates anything, we should hate it just as much. And we know that he does. But a proud look, those who are prideful, the Lord hates that. A lying tongue. I've heard people say that before. They have no pity for liars, and neither does the Lord. We don't need to be deceitful. Hands that shed innocent blood. People who commit murder, and it makes me think of abortion. People who shed, how much more innocent can you get than a beautiful child that's not in this, directly in the world yet, but has a heartbeat and is obviously alive. That's why you have to end its life. But all these things we should hate. It should despise us. And false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. Just in the local body of Christ, what we're a part of, that's what burns me up a lot, is when you have someone who's in the congregation that's just divisive. Because I've been a part of churches where that's happened. There's been some churches where there was no eldership, and that just kept going on for years and years. You had, for some reason, I don't know, and eventually somebody just got the part where they said, you know what, I'm sick and tired of it. You can leave or I'm going to leave. And somehow that fixed a lot of problems. That person finally quit doing that. But I would hate to be known as that one, because the Lord hates that. So we should hate those things just as much, certainly so. Exodus 32 verse 19 is another one of what should provoke us to anger. Exodus 32:19. And whoever wants to read that one can. Actually, if you will, let's see. Yeah, we'll just read verse 19. Exodus 32:19. Whoever would like it.
It came about, as soon as Moses came near the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger burned, and he threw the tablets from his hand and shattered them at the foot of the mountain.
That's pretty mad, right? You just received something from the Lord, and you're so mad. You threw it on the ground and it broke. Either way, you dropped it, whatever it is. Maybe you've done that before. You've been so in shock that maybe you've dropped something. I know most people drop their jaws, right, when they see something crazy. But that's what Moses did. And how crazy it was that they were already turning to this. And yes, Moses was gone for a while, and they said, hey, this man's already dead. We don't know where he is. We're lost. We're a sheep without a shepherd. But they shouldn't have done this because they were just freed from Egypt. They should have remembered who they were. And I like what Aaron said in verse 22. It says, do not let the anger of my Lord become hot. You know the people, that they are set on evil. You know, don't be mad over this. But you know, the Lord was mad over it because he had done so much for them. And you remember that he was so mad, he was just, it's time to end it all. You remember? And Moses had to intercede on that behalf, if I remember correctly, of this particular passage. He had to intercede on their behalf, and luckily God turned from that and said, you know what, you're right. I need to, not be angry right now. I need to calm my anger down in a way. That God was angry, and we feel that same emotion as God does. I find that interesting. We can connect with God in the same way that when we should be angry over things we should be angry actually about. It makes me think of false doctrine. That's the first thing that came to my mind, thinking of these people who turned to something different that would not save them. And today, when messages are being preached that's not going to save anyone, it should bother a Christian who follows the word of Jehovah. It should bother someone when a different message is preached than a different message than what Jesus spoke. It should bother us when that happens. It really should. It should provoke us enough to want to say something about it and not just be passive. Maybe brush it under the rug or whatever, but hey, let me have an opportunity to teach. Let me have an opportunity to show you the truth of God's Word. That's what it should make you want to do. But it should bother you when different things are brought in that are not what God has designed or taught. It should absolutely provoke us to anger in a way, provoke us to do something about it. All right. Any questions on that one? 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 31 through 34. This one very briefly, but you remember that Saul. I believe it was Saul had it not good. He didn't like David too well. You remember the account of that. But of course, Jonathan was David's friend, and when Saul revealed that he was going to kill David, that he did not have it very well for him, Jonathan rose up from the table mad at this. And there's some easy lessons to pull from that, of course, is that we should not be excited when evil is about to go down. It should anger us. It should anger us. And there's a lot that goes into that one as well. Making a mockery of God's house. That's the one of Matthew 21, 12 through 13, where Jesus threw over the tables and the money changers. Should that bother us today if somebody comes in the church today, and not directly that this is a temple, but if someone were to come in today and start abusing the works of the church, should that bother us? Boy, it should burn you up. It burned up Jesus. You remember, and not only that, and I think about why this maybe would have been so hard for Jesus, or maybe why he got so mad. Obviously, he had every reason to be. But they were taking advantage of the poor people. Do you think Jesus' family was wealthy? If you remember, that's what Mary, I believe she had to get this sacrifice. That was the sacrifice that she had to offer. And when Jesus was even earlier in life, that I think it was the dove offering, the one for that, and that was the cheapest one that you could get. That was for the poor. That was for those who did not have money. And that's what these people were doing. They were taxing them to convert their money into temple money. So think about that. I hate taxes, and well, in a sense, the Lord does too when it comes to misapplying those taxes and abusing those taxes. And that's exactly what they were doing. But friends, when people do that today, it should burn us up that we're not here for money. Money is just a tool. It should absolutely make us mad, and it should. It just burns me up. I've heard people say that before. I know of people that's had money. I'm trying to think of the right designation for that. I can't remember if it was a raffle or what, just to get more people in church attendance. That's not how you draw people in, or to keep them there anyway. That might bring them there. Maybe they'd find a $100 bill under their seat, but we know that's not what it's all about, and Jesus knew it too. And this last one here, what should provoke us to anger? Seeing people given to idolatry. Acts chapter 17, verse 16 says something to us. I believe it was Paul. Acts 17:16 says, Now while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was given over to idols. That bothered him. It bothered him to see that they were worshiping something, obviously, that was not God and was not correct. It bothered him. And in a sense, it should make us bothered today when people are worshiping other things than what they need to be. So I'm out of time, so I'm going to give you a few more of these. And here's the whole kicker of our class. Anger is justified sometimes, but sometimes we can lose control of our anger, and we have to guard that just as we do our tongue and other things. We control how we act. I can't control how my spouse acts. I can't control how my family acts. I can't control how my co-workers act, but I can control how I act. Ephesians 4:26. That's right. What does it say? If anybody's there or memorized it. That's right. Be angry and sin not. You can be angry sometimes. That is justifiable. There are things to be angry over. But sin not. Sin not.
I like that part. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath.
There you go.
Don't go to bed angry.
Don't go to bed angry. People may work somewhat different, but for the majority part, if you go to bed angry at your spouse, you're probably not going to wake up in the best of moods. And I've told Kayla that before. I'm that person where I'm like, hey, I said, we got to fix it now. I said, not only will I not be able to go to sleep, I said, I'm probably going to wake up aggravated tomorrow. And that's just me. Some people like to stew on it for days and hours and months and years, but that's not me, and neither is it Kayla. She's pretty good about that. But you're right. And that's wise wisdom. And it's a commandment too. There's wisdom in that from God. But be angry, but don't sin. Don't sin. Sometimes we can be so angry that we get so mad and we do things that we're going to regret later. And if you deal with that, because we have to be transparent here, we all deal with anger, but some of us more than others. And we may need anger management classes. We may need something from God and His Word, of course, and we need that about our anger and things that we do. But be angry. There's sometimes you need to be angry, but control yourself. And maybe you need to leave the room. Control yourself. Go outside, scream, whatever. I don't know. But don't take it out on anybody else. Yes, sir. Do you have something?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I keep thinking about, getting the times I've been angry. And then, a couple days go down the road, and I think back, I'm like, why did I get angry about that?
Yeah.
That's something we got to realize, too. Just because we're angry doesn't mean it's really worth getting angry about.
That's right. That's right. And about 99% of the things I think that I've been angry about, I feel the same way. That you look back at it and you're like, man, I shouldn't have been that mad, But, we as humans, I make mistakes. But sometimes, it just catches you off guard. But either way, Tate has to control his anger. And we have to control our anger. We're never justified to do anything because of our anger. And you know what I'm talking about. Retaliation, whatever that may be. Just control ourselves. And that may be harder for some. And I struggle with that too. And we need to be careful. But closing on our thoughts, what office in the church is forbidden to one easily angered? Elders, that's right. Why do you think that is? Are elders in any high stress situations or any difficult situations? If you put a man that's just lickety-split, mad, and cracks somebody over the head over nothing, when church problems comes up, My dad's an elder, has been for years. He doesn't tell me everything, but we've talked about a few, and he's like, man, he said, you'd be surprised what comes in here. Sometimes the problems that come in here, and you wouldn't think that they were, but they are. And he's like, you just have to be cool as a cucumber, as he says, and I agree. But you put somebody in a man who's leading a congregation who is easily mad, it's not going to pan out. There's wisdom in that. Of course, God commanded it. Should not be doing that. If a man's that mad that quick, he don't need to be doing the work of the Lord, because he will be stressed out and he will deal with things. All right. Our last thought. We have 1 minute. Anger, if you don't control it, will give you increased anxiety, high blood pressure. Some have said you may need, online, it said you may need anger management courses to help with that. But either way, it's not beneficial for your body, and it doesn't certainly help you. But if you absolutely deal with anger issues, and it maybe even causes you to act in a way that you don't need to with your spouse, number one, we need to quit cold turkey. In a sense, we can stop doing wrong and start doing right. Walk away, read the Bible, spend time alone, talk to a friend. But either way, we can't control our anger. And there's a lot of people sometimes that will tell you otherwise, but the Lord says we can, and He's not going to make us do something we can't. Yes, sir.
I have seen people who I believe personally, intentionally use anger to get what they want. I had a boss one time who would take an employee and call them into his office, leave the door open so everybody could hear.
Oh, yeah.
He would berate that person just unmercifully.
Yeah.
Military people sometimes do that.
Mm-hmm.
They'll find somebody who hasn't done something right, and we'll say, we're going to make an example of you.
Yeah.
We need to be careful that we render justice fairly and not just to benefit our own self.
That's right. And there's a difference between righteous indignation and unrighteous. And there's a reason to be mad sometimes, but don't misuse it, definitely. And whether it's your marriage or workplace. All right. Well, we're out of time. I know our children are about to come in and everybody else, so we'll go ahead and conclude there. Yes, sir. Well, how you doing? Same here. I was telling them I need coffee this morning.